Now, the very first NATO summit was in 1957. NATO had been formed 8 years earlier, but there had never actually been a NATO summit, a meeting of all the leaders of the NATO countries. So that was going to be a major world event. It was a dozen years after World War II. Amid the increasing competition between the West and the Soviet Union, NATO countries would gather in Paris to reaffirm their unity. And the undisputed leader of the alliance was President Dwight Eisenhower, not only because he was the American president. After being the commander of Allied forces in Europe during World War II, but before he was elected president, Eisenhower became the first supreme Allied commander of NATO. But President Eisenhower almost didn't make it to that very first NATO summit because just a few weeks before the summit was due to start, this happened.
Illness stalks the chief executive as he stands bareheaded in the chill autumn air at Blair House. Shortly after, a chill sends him to bed, forerunner of more serious news. The following day, America hears the alarming tidings. From White House physician Howard Snyder, the nation learns that the president has suffered a mild stroke, resulting in a speech impairment. Secretary Dulles and other government leaders, including Defense Secretary McElroy, converge on the White House, where Acting Press Secretary Ann Wheaton issues bulletins. Vice President Nixon sums up the situation.
We expect that the president, after a period of recuperation, will be able to return to his desk in the White House, and that he will, as the doctors have indicated, fully recover.
President Eisenhower had already had a heart attack in office 2 years earlier. Now this mini stroke. There were concerns that he might not be up to the regular duties of office, let alone a grueling transatlantic trip to meet with 14 other world leaders. The New York Times published this cartoon depicting Eisenhower as Atlas, carrying both the problems of his office and questionable health on his back while trudging up a hill marked Course of World Events. The Times worried that going to the NATO summit would be, quote, a too gallant gesture that may bring on another siege of illness. But Ike did go to Paris, arriving at the NATO summit all smiles, just 3 weeks after his health scare. And the other NATO leaders were so demonstrably relieved that he made it that Eisenhower started his opening remarks at the summit, thanking them all for their well wishes.
Mr. President, my NATO friends, before I begin, I should like to express my appreciation of the over-generous sentiments that have been expressed by President Besch and by the Prime Minister of France respecting myself. And particularly, I appreciate your good wishes for my good health.
And so the very first NATO summit ever began, the first of nearly 30 NATO summits that have taken place in the decades since. And NATO's membership in that time has doubled. In 1957, there were 15 NATO countries. Now there are 30. And so at today's NATO summit in Brussels, they needed a much bigger table for their meeting than they did in 1957.